I'll tell you right now, nothing will jolt you awake faster than walking into your little workshop in the morning, expecting to see rows of golden jars stacked neatly on the shelves, only to find them gone. Completely stripped, just sticky smears where hours of work and weeks of patient buzzing once lived. That's why I walked into that morning. The shelves were bare. A single lid was rolling slowly on the floor like some cruel punchline, and my chest tightened the way it does when you realize somebody's just reached right into your life and helped themselves. I rushed to the window, and there she was, clear as day. My neighbor, Carla, backing her SUV into my drive like she owned it, casually loading up my honey like it was a Costco haul. She even stopped to lick her finger, savoring it with this smug grin. I swear, the audacity coming off that woman could have powered the whole grid. Now, you need to understand, this honey wasn't just something I whipped up on the weekend for fun. It was my pride, my livelihood. My late wife used to say it was the thing that kept me sane after long weeks at work. I'd been tending those bees for years, learning their rhythm, protecting their hives, and every single jar on those shelves carried pieces of that care. So when Carla, who had already pushed my patience a dozen times before, decided she was entitled to it, something in me snapped. This wasn't the first time she crossed a line. She had borrowed my wheelbarrow for a couple of days, and I didn't see it again for half a year. She once borrowed my hedge trimmer and returned it rusted through. And one summer, she threw one of her wild backyard parties that ended with my gate broken and an entire hive knocked over. I spent hours coaxing those poor bees back home. And let me tell you, I don't spook easy, but watching thousands of angry bees fill the sky because somebody couldn't keep their drunk guests out of my yard, that stuck with me. Still, I bit my tongue. But honey? No, that's sacred ground. So I stormed out, ready to raise hell, but by the time I hit the driveway, she was already pulling out. She rolled her window down, waved with that too bright smile, and said, "Thanks for the honey. It's amazing. You should really sell it at the farmer's market." And then she drove off like she'd just done me a favor. I stood there in the dust cloud, dumbfounded. Sell it at the market? She stole my honey and then gave me business advice. That's when the decision hardened inside me. I wasn't just angry. I was at war. Now, I could have called the cops, sure. I could have confronted her husband or marched over there red-faced, demanding repayment. But Carla was the type who thrived on conflict. She'd spin it around until suddenly you're the one in trouble. No, if I was going to teach her a lesson, it had to be in a language she couldn't ignore. And I had the perfect army buzzing right in my backyard. See, over the years, I'd learned more than just how to harvest honey. I'd studied the chemistry of it, the natural pheromones bees respond to. There was a special blend I kept on hand, usually to guide wandering bees back into their hive when they got confused. But mix just right into a jar of honey. Let's just say it turns anyone who touches it into the most interesting thing in a mile radius. For bees, anyway. The plan was simple. Carla loved stealing what wasn't hers, and I was going to let her steal this. The very next day, I set the trap. I left one jar, one deliberately baited jar, sitting right back on the shelf where she'd swiped the others. No locks, no notes, no barriers. Just temptation waiting under a thin layer of glass. Then I sat back and waited. By noon, she struck. And that afternoon, while I was sipping tea on the porch, I heard it. At first it was faint, just a high-pitched scream drifting through the breeze, then louder, sharper, panicked. I walked to the fence, and there it was, Carla's backyard, transformed into pure chaos. She had set up one of her over-the-top brunch spreads, charcuterie boards, and champagne flutes, all centered around. You guessed it, my honey, smeared and drizzled like some trophy centerpiece. And then came the bees. At first a handful hovered around her pastry plates, curious, harmless. But the pheromones don't lie. Within minutes, dozens more were circling, then hundreds, their hum filling the air like a storm siren. Her guests bolted, one man dove into the pool fully clothed, another tripped over a chair and took out half a flower bed. Carla was the star of the show, screaming, flailing, running in circles with her overpriced sundress flapping as bees chased her like cartoon villains chasing a ham. She slapped at them, swatted with napkins, made it 10 times worse. I leaned on the fence, sipping my tea, and I'll be honest, I didn't feel guilty. Watching her own greed come back to sting her, literally, was better than any courtroom victory I could have imagined. But here's the thing about Carla. She doesn't learn. She doesn't reflect. She doesn't apologize. She plots. And I knew it. That brunch disaster wasn't going to stop her. If anything, it just made her more determined. So I doubled down. I prepared a second jar, this one even stronger, infused so heavily that bees wouldn't just notice it. They'd treat it like a magnet. If she so much as opened it, she'd become a walking, talking hive attraction. And like clockwork, she took the bait again. I watched from my upstairs window as she snuck into my yard one evening, glancing around like a raccoon caught in a spotlight, then stuffed the jar into her purse and scurried off. Predictable. A few days later, another brunch. Bigger this time. Fancy flower arrangements, linen tablecloths, twice as many guests. She set the honey front and center again, beaming like she'd just discovered gold. I stood out by my hives, pretending to work, but really just waiting. It started subtle. A bee or two circling the drinks, another buzzing around the pastries. Guests swatted lazily, annoyed. But within minutes, the hum grew louder, thicker, heavier, and then the swarm shifted. They weren't after the food anymore. They were after Carla. The pheromones locked them in. They landed on her shoulders, her hair, her hands. For a second, she tried to play it cool, forced a laugh, but the moment one crawled down her arm, she lost it. Her scream shattered the air, and the entire brunch imploded. Guests scrambled, plates crashed, champagne spilled across the patio. One woman shrieked and ducked under the table. A man knocked over the entire dessert spread in his rush for the door. And in the center of it all, Carla bolted across her yard, arms windmilling, bees chasing her like they'd been waiting for this moment their whole lives. She dashed into her house, slammed the door, but bees don't care about doors. They lingered outside her windows, slipped through cracks in the siding, clung to the screen. From the sounds echoing inside, crashes, more screams, it was clear her battle wasn't over. I sat down in my chair, let the warm mug of tea settle in my hands, and thought that's justice. Simple, poetic, unavoidable. But peace never lasts long with people like Carla. A few days later, I found an envelope taped to my front door, embossed and dramatic, the kind of thing people send when they want to look more important than they are. Inside, a lawsuit. She was suing me for emotional distress, negligence, damages. She claimed my bees had attacked her recklessly and intentionally, that I'd created an unsafe environment. The thief was trying to paint herself as the victim. That's when I called Lisa, my lawyer. Tough as nails, no patience for nonsense. I told her everything. She sighed and said, she doesn't have a case. If anything, she just handed us a win. And sure enough, when the court date rolled around, Carla showed up in a neck brace, clutching tissues like she'd survived a natural disaster. She cried to the judge about the terror of being hunted by bees. She dabbed her eyes, her voice trembling, but it was all theater. When the judge finally turned to me, I stayed calm. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I have security footage. The room went quiet. The bailiff plugged in the USB, and up on the screen, plain as day, there was Carla sneaking into my yard, stealing my honey, smirking like she just robbed a bank. The next clip rolled, her backyard brunch devolving into chaos, guests diving into pools while she screamed and ran, bees buzzing harmlessly toward the honey she'd smeared across everything. The judge rubbed his temples, clearly exhausted. Ms. Carla, he said, did you, or did you not, steal this honey? She opened her mouth, then shut it, opened again, but nothing came out. I'll take that as a yes, he said flatly. Case dismissed, and I strongly suggest you stay off your neighbor's property unless you want real legal trouble. She turned redder than a boiled lobster, grabbed her designer bag, and stormed out. I sat back down, a grin tugging at my mouth. It wasn't just victory, it was vindication. These days, she avoids me completely. No forced smiles, no passive-aggressive comments about my garden. If we cross paths, she just looks away, maybe half expecting bees to swoop down at any moment. My shelves are full again. The bees hum their steady hymn, and the honey stays exactly where it belongs. The lesson, at least for me, was was simple. Some people believe they're untouchable, that they can take and take without consequences. But sometimes the consequences don't come from the law or from angry words. They come from nature itself, buzzing, patient, and undeniable. So, let me ask you, what do you think? Did Carla get what she deserved? Or did I go too far letting the bees teach her a lesson? If someone stole from you, would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear if you'd call that justice, karma, or just a beekeeper giving the world a little sting of truth.